Welcome into UGA Football Live with JC Shelton, where the dogs come to talk. Welcome in, guys. Another episode of UGA Football Live with JC Shelton at the new crib, the new spot. If you're a fan of the show, you see a new background. Spent about 12 hours yesterday on this because I'm a procrastinator. I knew I had a show today with none other than Arthur Lynch, former Georgia tight end. One of my favorites when I was watching when I was a young kid. That should make you feel old, Artie. We always have great conversations. This is Arthur's first time on YouTube, though. If you're a fan of the show, you know he's been on several times. Always have great conversations and really good insight from a former Georgia and NFL tight end. Arthur, let the people know how you're doing, man.
Yeah, well, first, JC, congratulations on your engagement. A lot of change in your life. If you procrastinate, you're a good procrastinator because the office looks good, minus the Atlanta paraphernalia over there, or whatever, however you want to describe it. Red Sox guy. I think we just took 2 or 3 from you guys, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, I did.
Long story short, doing well. Back in Massachusetts. Working, living up here, still following the dogs very closely. Excited to kind of talk about the Georgia football team a little bit because my guy, actually a couple of my guys, when I say my guys, I see my old coaches are now back with the staff, whether it be, Searles, BMAC, and obviously, the head honcho for the offense with Mike Bobo. Excited to talk about tight ends, excited to talk about the dogs, but really appreciate you having me back on. Always enjoy speaking with you as well, and excited that everything for you and your personal and private, personal and professional life are going well.
Absolutely, thank you, bud. I really appreciate it, man. But let's get into it. So we'll start it right there. Obviously, Mike Bobo. We'll talk about Searles and BMAC as well. A lot of good things coming from these guys as far as the players talking about them, their former players. Kirby Smart, obviously, very high on these guys. That's why he brought them in. That's why he kept them around. The University of Georgia has paid them a lot to keep them around. And it's interesting to me that these guys, they could maybe take a next step in other places, but they still decide to stay in Athens. A lot of former Bulldogs there, obviously in Bobo and BMAC, who decide to stay in Athens and staying maybe in lower roles than they could have otherwhere. And they still, they're riding this championship mindset and these 2 championships back to back, and really, really good roster coming back. Obviously, new quarterback Carson Beck. There's a lot of questions there, and we can only say so much about that before it starts in the SEC schedule, before they get under pressure. That's what I'm really looking forward to, and Carson Beck, seeing how he performs in those SEC games, right? But as far as tight ends, you have Brock Bowers returning. That's all you really need to know about that tight end room. I love Oscar Delp. He's no Darnell Washington. He's not going to be that extra tackle as a blocker, but he showed improvement in that area last year. So I think I like what I see from him, and obviously 2 freshmen coming in, Lawson Lucky, Pierce Spurlin, 2 of the top 5 tight ends in their recruiting class. Lawson Lucky went off this spring. Talk a little bit about what you like from Brock Bowers, what sets him apart, and we'll get into Bobo.
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, to answer the question about Brock, it's really the only answer you can say is what don't you like? Obviously, he's proven himself to be the blocker that he needs to be at a high level. Now doing it for 2 seasons, where people, I think if you could knock him anything is if you could knock anything about him as a player, which you really can't because he is a complete tight end, is he's not the Darnell Washington type blocker. But I think we all need to remind ourselves that when you look at just physical bodies and physical skills, Darnell Washington is really one of one. So it's impossible to compare the 2. And when I think you're looking at Brock as an individual talent, he's probably top 5, top 3 greatest tight ends to come through college. I think you could probably make the argument that he's going to be, when it's all said and done, the best tight end to ever play the game at the college level. However that translates in the NFL, it's going to be, between where he goes and how he continues to develop. But I think he's such a unique talent. Following Georgia from a distance here in Massachusetts, particularly this offseason, it seems like they're using him in even more unique ways. I know he's gotten some carries before in his career, but it seems that there was a little bit of depth issue at running back, so they actually may have had him lining up in the backfield and taking snaps. I remind people, I know it's a sensitive subject because of how his story turned out, but Aaron Hernandez, when they were running those two tight end sets, when New England was really humming in the mid 2000s, around the same time AJ was catching balls for the Dogs. I see his jersey in the back there. They used Aaron Hernandez in that kind of H-back, running back, slot receiver type role. And from a pure talent standpoint, I think Brock is going to be able to do those things in this upcoming season, continuing his success from his previous 2 years. So I'm super excited. You mentioned some of the young guys. I think there is a space for a guy to fill the role as that, solidify themselves as that number two. Delt, obviously a very unique talent, a little bit longer than Brock, very good receiver. I know you mentioned Lawson Lucky, have not really seen him play, haven't seen his great practices. Rave reviews about his ability to catch the ball and do things in open space. I'm really curious about this guy, Pierce, right? Sperlin, I think is his name, the third.
Yeah.
He is a big body, right? He's a unique physical, let's call it skill set that is probably could potentially fill the role of Darnell. Darnell was, I remember I was talking to Christian Robinson, who was a former Georgia linebacker, obviously coached against Georgia and against Darnell. And I remember asking him after, I was like, man, what's Zero like? He was like, Bubba, I've never seen a guy like him on the field in the tight end position. And so I think that's I don't want to put, this guy, again, Pierce. I don't want to put Pierce in a position where he has to fill those shoes, but I think a body type, that kind of point of attack blocker, I think he could probably turn some heads early on just from a sheer physical ability to block. So I don't know much about him, but I do know his measurables are pretty unique. So
yeah. I'll give you a quick rundown. He was number 2 tight end ranked, 6'6", pushing 6'7", so he is around that. Not quite, maybe as Darnell, not as heavy, but he still was like 250, right? Darnell was like 270, something ridiculous like that.
Ridiculous.
But the thing about what kind of hurt Pierce is the broken collarbone early spring. Held him out the G-Day, held him out spring practices. So he's having to come from behind, which I think sets the expectations low for him enough to where he can work at it, get the reps with the 2s and 3s, maybe work his way into it and prove himself. And he doesn't have to come into a spot where, hey, I gotta hit hard now. I gotta show myself, with a room of Brock Bowers and Oscar Delp. So I think the expectations are there for low for him, so he can come into those run sets and maybe prove himself. I don't know how much that shoulder is going to hurt him. But he is, like you said, a big body. Maybe that's a good point there, that he can kind of take that role on and be that big blocker and also catch. But I mean, he has his highlights. I mean, that man can run and catch too. So it'd be really exciting in this room moving forward. As far as the tight end, so my thing here is like, how much do we credit the way that Monken's offense worked with Bowers to get him open, other than Bowers' just talent alone, right? Because it feels like after that first season when he broke out and set UGA records as a tight end, freshman, true freshman, it feels like, the teams would catch up to that, start playing him different, start doubling him, start hitting him off the line, stuff like that. And nobody was really able to stop him, So how can Mike Bobo kind of keep that going? And how much do we credit Monken's offense for giving him that area to work with?
Yeah, I think it's complementary, right? I think obviously Monken's a great football coach, right? I think if you look at his history, he had success as an offensive coach with the Browns. Actually, my former position coach, John Lilly, who's now with the Carolina Panthers, was a tight end coach under Monken for the Browns. So I do think from just a schematic point of view, from a football IQ, Monken is elite, right? But any great coach will tell you, you can draw up the best game plan in the world. If you don't got special dudes to go execute those plays are going to, they're going to be worth jack, what. So I think you're never going to be able to ignore the special talent that is Brock Bowers, right? I think it was apparent from a very, very, early onset of his career. His ability to stretch the defense, outrun linebackers, be too physical and too big for safeties and corners. again, I mentioned his ability to run the football. I believe he was a high school halfback, running back. So it's like he's just a special talent, right? And there's no getting around that. But when you meet those two, when those two aspects of football meet, you have a unique special talent and you have a great offensive mind. Special things happen, and special things have happened in Athens the past 2 years. Obviously, they're the national champions 2 years in a row. Now, pivoting over to the conversation about Mike Bobo, right? I think if you look at Coach Bobo's track record, right, he's always made tight end a point of emphasis in his offense, right? And when he has had special players in those positions, those people have performed at a high level. I was not one of those players. I was an average athlete. Coach Bobo was able to get the most out of my talent, and I had a very good career. Conversely, speaking about a different person, Orson Charles was a special athlete, a special talent. What was Orson Charles? A Mackey Award finalist and an All-American. I think the proof is in the pudding that when you give Mike Bobo special, unique talent at the tight end position, he is going to produce results at that position. So I think when you look at the production that Brock Bowers has had the past 2 years, paired with the collective group in that room that they have, I think he's going to have another special season, right? I think Bobo is going to be able to create mismatches for Brock and also for the other guys in that room, because a lot of point of emphasis for defenses will be stopping Brock. So that might open up opportunities for everybody else around him. Yep. And Bobo, if nothing else, is unbelievable at creating a balanced environment for his offenses. You go back to 2011, 2012, and 2013. Particularly 2013, we were riddled with injuries, and we had guys like myself, Brett McGowan, Towns, Brent Hart. We had guys that
Nick Chubb in the backfield too. The injury,
yeah, and you just think about how many guys went down and how many people stepped up, and they were able to step up and produce at a high level because we were coached up by guys like Coach BMAC and guys like Coach Bobo. But more importantly, Coach Bobo put together offensive game plans that was able to maximize our talents. And when you can maximize the talents of special players based off the coaching ability of your staff, man, I think the sky's the limit. So I have the utmost confidence in Bobo and obviously his staff. And I think so does Kirby Smart, right? Kirby is not handing out charity cases. You hear him speak. You see what he's built at Georgia. That guy's a competitive mother effer, dude. Okay, like he wants to crush people. He wants to crush the competition. He is not bringing in somebody because they're friends. He's bringing in somebody into his program because it's a strategic and calculated decision by the head man being Kirby Smart, to make a better and more competitive environment so they can continue to get better and continue to kind of win the way that they're winning, which is at the highest level.
Yeah, it really reminds me of something when you were talking about Bobo there, of what John Thea said. Shout out to John, also friend of the show. He was really talking about how he maximizes the talent that he has. He's not going to ask a player to do something he can't do. John 100%. Really repeated that a few times. So that really, it makes sense what you say there. And I really think that Brock's catch radius, it's like impossible to defend. Even when he was doubled last year, he was still making catches over guys because his catch radius and his speed, he can get to a ball. And he can also reach and get the ball as well. So it's going to be big for Carson Beck. I mean, Stetson Bennett wasn't insanely accurate all the time with Brock, but Brock made him look really good sometimes. So I like that. And then when you're talking about other players too, and specifically receiver position, when you have Ladd McConkey coming back, who's incredible. And then Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint showed a lot with his hands last year. He's only dropped a few passes in his whole career, I believe. And then you have the transfer receivers and Ra Thomas, Dominic Lovett, led their SEC teams in receiving last year. I think, if you double Brock or you double one of these guys, it's going to open up something for somebody else. And from what I've heard from you guys, the former guys under Bobo, his game planning, he's going to be looking for that stuff. And I'm sure him and Carson Beck will be on the same page. Also, let's talk about the verbiage here for a second, because this has been a big thing I've been preaching to people as well. It's like, for these new guys coming into a new offense and having to learn completely new verbiage, which is a lot, it's a lot to learn, especially with a complex offense. Having the same verbiage with 2 offensive coordinators and a changeover. How big is that? These guys are already comfortable in their route trees and their verbiage. Carson, obviously a 4th-year player under Monken's system, comes in. Bobo, same verbiage. He doesn't have to have a lot of learning to do. There's not a big turnover there. I mean, I think that's really big.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think one thing that Kirby Smart has started to do, and really started it with Muschamp and Bobo, is which he obviously took right out of Nick Saban's playbook. It's like, let's bring really smart, successful football minds into the program, pay them some money, kind of have them let them do this little college coaching, vacation, internship, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But let's just get smart people in a room, and let's try to, see what kind of value they bring. Conversely, you start talking about, okay, Bobo was able to be there with Monken. I mean, he was in the room all year long, right? Bobo was not just sitting there, being, I know for a fact he wasn't being quiet. I just know Coach Bobo, right? He is going to provide input, and he's going to provide value, right? With that being said, Monken, who is obviously now a proven NFL coordinator and a proven college coordinator, winning 2 national championships as an offensive coordinator and building up Stetson Bennett into what he was and is. I think Bobo is like, okay, I need to take the best things from that offense and then the best things from my history as a coach and as a play caller, bring them together. And I do think one thing that Bobo did a really, really, really good job of, especially for us when we were there, is like, hey, what works and how can we teach it to where these kids, it registers with these kids, because that's what they are, right? We're all kids in college sports at the end of the day. And so I think that continuity in the verbiage from a schematic standpoint, right? The different schemes are really not going to be all that different. There might be a few things, right? A route combination for Monken, which will be the same route combination for Bobo, might be called different things, right? Like it might be 144 Demon, which is what Coach Bobo would call, which is one of our plays, Coach Bobo, might be called something different under Monken's system. But at the end of the day, the protection is going to be the same. The route tree is going to be the same. How they coach it up is going to be the same. So I do think that continuity, particularly for Carson Beck, like you said, is going to be huge. I'm not going to say that they're going to hit the ground running and that they're going to blow through everybody. Like, that's when you have a change of the quarterback position, coaching can only do so much. Right? The psyche that goes into these quarterbacks is so unique. I mean, like, whether you watch the Netflix series Quarterback or you talk to Aaron Murray, the level of responsibility that is on the shoulders of this particular position is heavy, and they gotta handle a lot of things off the field and a lot of things on the field. And I think, the pressure's on Carson, but I do think he's in a phenomenal position to succeed because he has natural God-given talent that, quite frankly, Stetson didn't have, and I do think that he is in a position where he's able to learn from really smart offensive coaches with tons of experience. And let's face it, when you recruit at the level that Kirby Smart recruits at, he's got 5 stars all around him, and I think he was a 5-star. So I do think he's going to succeed. But I'm not going to sit here and predict that he absolutely will. But me personally, based on what we've seen and what I've heard and what's around him, I think he's in a position to do very, very, very well. And I think the Dogs are in for another great year.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I've been saying it for a while as well. Is like, I expect some growing pains. I think that's maybe what you were alluding to there, especially when we get to an SEC schedule, or maybe we're on the road, we're at Tennessee, something like that. Maybe something bad happens, maybe an interception happens. How do you respond? That's what I want to see. Because Stetson, that's why he did so well to me. Obviously, working hard and working behind talented guys and showing his work ethic as well. And then developing his deep ball was a big thing, becoming more accurate, but also having that GOAT mentality when you go out there, and he's going to be a great 100%. Backup quarterback because of that. Is when you come in, he doesn't care what's happened, what he just did. He's in there to win. He's in there to make plays. I think, and Carson Beck told Aaron Murray coming out of the spring game, which he played really well in. That's why I came away more confident, the way he was able to read the defense. And those are no slouches he's playing against either. And those, you can talk about the competition on the field as well. Those defensive coaches want to tear those offensive coaches up. Like, they want to scheme.
Yeah,
they want to. Yeah. The players too. They want to prove themselves. So We can only take so much from the spring game, but I think there is that institute is there as well. But I think the pieces around him, like you said, he's set up for success, but can we see it happen? We'll only get to find out. And if you're wondering why we're talking about so much of the offense, it's because that's the only thing that's changed, guys. Because that defense is going to be a top 3 defense in the country, maybe number 1, but top 3 at least. Probably the best in the SEC as far as talent, coaching wise. Coaches are still there. You have Muschamp, Kirby. I'm not worried about the defense at all. It's about the offense, because that's why Georgia has won back-to-back, because that offense was humming both years, even last year more than the first year. That's why 15-0 and 65-7 happened. But so a lot of great things for that defense, but the offense, some questions, and it's really exciting to see, because you never know what you're going to get. Let's see the first couple games. We're not going to know nothing because of the schedule, I feel like, but maybe when we play South Carolina, we'll get to see a little bit more of what Carson's made of in this tight end room and how they're used under Bobo. Let's move on here. Let's talk about your career a little bit, because you were before we recorded, guys, Artie was telling me a story, or he started to tell me a story about AJ, and I wanted to save that for the show. So you get the chance to sit behind and watch AJ Green work, and one of my favorite players of all time. We talked about the jersey. I think you're one of yours as well. Tell me that story, man. Tell me about playing under him and kind of watching, sitting back.
Yeah, well, there's definitely a couple. I mean, the first thing that you have to realize about AJ too is the most humble, quiet, reserved, hardest working dude you'll ever meet, right? Just like kind of like a South Carolina country kid who just like loves his family. Like all he ever cared about in college, he just loved sneakers. Didn't really, what I mean? Just had a shoe collection, had a little hat collection, and was just like would show up every single day, whether it be in the weight room, in the classroom, or on the field, and ball out. You know what I mean? Like set himself apart, which we all kind of knew he was a specially gifted guy, much like Brock Bowers or Todd Gurley or all these different types of guys that you've seen be first round picks. So we knew that he was special. But the thing that I always was just like kind of amazed by is, we talked a little bit earlier about Orson Charles, right? So when I came into college, Orson and I were the same year. Orson obviously had a pretty stellar career, All-American, Mackey Award finalist. So he started as a freshman All-American. I played as a freshman, but it was mostly in a situational type role, right? Short yardage, goal line, special teams. So when the offense was out there, like I was locked into the game, but I was kind of a fan, right? I was just like, man, I'm locked in on AJ. What the heck is AJ going to do? And the same way in practice. And I'll never forget, again, he was quiet and reserved, but if you poke the bear a little bit, I mean, he was coming for you. And, Brandon Boykin, who I love. So I'm going to tell this story, and I may have told it before on this show. And Brandon, I'm sorry, but Brandon, and Brandon, to his credit, was an All-American, all-purpose guy, won an all-purpose award, all SEC draft pick, 8 years in the league, stud. Like if we were to have a dunk contest on UGA's campus, Brandon Boykin would win. Unbelievable athlete. Yeah. But he was chirping AJ, and Boykin was having a great year. And AJ, again, never said anything, right? Like just cool, calm, collective. Like we knew that AJ was the guy, but Boykin was just chirping him. And then finally, we're doing this kind of Bobo would have this thing kind of like a half skill where you'd have a running back, a slot guy, and a Z or an X out there as a receiver, and it would be kind of like screen. It would be like screen or like slip screen kind of drills and half skill, and so we're at the end of the drill. Boykin has been chirping AJ this entire time, like I want you, like you ain't, you know what. I'm not sure if I can cuss or not, but he's just going at him, and finally, right, like as the horn is about to be blown for the next period, AJ goes, I want you, get the hell up on the line. And so like he gets up on the line and like just tells him what he's going to run, and just does like kind of like a stutter up to a screen, gets the screen from, and like Bobo didn't tell him to go. Like AJ's like, we're doing this right now. We're like, this ends today. And takes the ball, snacks it basically with one hand, turns up field, looks at Boykin. Boykin comes to make the tackle. And I kid you not, like takes his like Heisman hands Boykin to the ground, throws him goes upfield, looks around, takes the ball, spins it at him, and goes, "Don't ever talk shit to me again," and just walks off the field. And I'm sitting there like, and I'm like, I'm a freshman, you know what I mean? Like afraid to talk, essentially. Like, and I knew Boykin was a dude as well, and I'm just like, man, AJ is just a freak. And then obviously you see him go on and have the career that he had, and the reason we brought up the conversation, I saw the jersey. Obviously, he retired this past year, but he was just a unique and special athlete, a great human being, and like just one more little anecdote story about AJ and just his unique athleticism, right? He comes out of high school as a 5-star football recruit and a 5-star basketball recruit. So, I mentioned Boykin being a really good basketball player and, dunker and stuff. I did a tweet the other day talking about like the top 10 guys I'd want on a basketball team from UGA. And Boykin and AJ were like essentially top 3 of the guys. So we're playing at Ramsey Center one day, which is the kind of the rec center on campus. And you just see like, I'm watching AJ go, and I didn't know anything about like recruiting coming into, college. I knew myself and my classmates, but I didn't know how big of a deal AJ was. And so all of a sudden I see this guy like, I mean, he's wet, right? Like has handles, can move, layups, dunks. And AJ, and I just look at AJ, I'm like, yo, AJ, man, like, you're pretty good, huh? He's like, yeah, I'm all right. And I'm like, what would you be doing if you weren't playing football at UGA? He was like, oh, I'd be playing for Coach Roy Williams at UNC. I'd be a starting 2 guard. And I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, like that's where I want to go play basketball. If I didn't play football at Georgia, I just play football more. And I was just sitting there like jaw on the floor because you're just like it was the first time that I really looked up and kind of eyes wide, be like, oh, I'm around some like elite world class athletes. I may not be one of them. I might get to play with them, but a guy like AJ, you see his ability to go be a professional on and off the field. But it comes down to, just a natural God-given ability met with a fierce competitive spirit and just dog work ethic, man. I mean, an absolute dog in the weight room, in the classroom, and on the field.
Those are great stories, man. And obviously you remember the highlights, and what really stood out to me there is you talk about how humble he was, how quiet he was. That's what I really liked when I watched him as well. Yeah. Like it sounds like he would talk to you if you poked the bear a little bit, but you didn't really see much of that on the field. He was just about his business. He would moss you and then just walk back to the huddle, walk by the sideline. Like that's just business, And I think that's what I really liked. I love that mentality when guys have that. Like Brock Bowers has that as well.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get me wrong. I love the cornerbacks who talk a lot of trash, get burned every now and then, but are really good as well. Like Deion Sanders. That's all. How can you not like Deion when he was playing? But also that like that humble mentality too is something I really like to see because it's just, I don't know, it's something about, it's like a GOAT, man. It's like a Michael Jordan kind of thing. He just knows he's the greatest and he doesn't really care. So I love that, man.
Yeah, it's like the quote, like what's understood doesn't need to be explained. You know what I mean? And like, and the one thing that I loved about playing with guys like AJ and Boykin for that matter too. Like Boykin was such a unique player for us and such a unique athlete. Like guys like Justin Houston, and when you talk about guys who are playing today, the Brock Bowers, the Jalen Carters, the Nolan Smiths, like as someone who just came from like a very Massachusetts, it's not a football recruiting hotbed. Like you don't see a lot of athletes like that. And to be able to go down there and play with guys like that and just see how just down to earth, normal, but just fierce competitors that they are, and they just let their games do the talking. Man, it was such a cool experience for me. And watching Georgia really live up to the expectations that I think that we all had for the program, and being able to see those types of guys like AJ and like Jarvis and like Brandon now be like on ESPN every single day and be the premier example of what college football should be and is. And that's really thanks to not just the players but Kirby Smart and the staff for allowing Georgia to take it to the next level. Because man, it's fun to watch, you know what I mean? And it was fun to be a part of. But seeing Georgia reach its full potential and then all those guys reaping the benefits of reaching the potential, which they've done on their own, is pretty special, man. It's fun to watch for sure.
Yeah, Kirby awoken a sleeping giant, and I
No
think he said
question.
that at ACC Media Days. Like, he knew Georgia could be a giant, and boys down south would do it different. I mean, Georgia is a hotbed, man. Florida's right there too. Two of the
Yeah.
best recruiting states in the country. So it's gonna be a great season, man. I can't wait. We'll have you on hopefully this season as well. We'll get you back on, man, and we'll see how Bobo, Carson Beck, and this Brock Bowers offense does, and maybe talk a little bit about it. Really appreciate your time, Arthur.
Yeah, JC, thank you so much. Would love to come back on. I'm excited to see where the Dogs go this year. Really excited for this tight end run. But as always, man, just friend to friend, I'm excited for you. I'm happy for your success professionally. And of course, personally as well. Congratulations on your engagement and the new move.
Thanks so much, buddy. Love you. Go
All
Dogs.
right, you too, brother. We'll talk soon. Go Dogs.